What is up, YouTube? This is Cody on the Real Sports Talk, bringing you pre-race video for the FedEx 400, which will benefit Autism Speaks. So it's a nice thing going on there with Denny Hamlin's sponsor. But this racetrack, Dover, it's a concrete mile, and it's known as the Monster Mile, and that is because it eats up race cars and race trucks, and that's what we've seen this entire weekend with the truck race. A lot of wrecks, some hard wrecks, and we see guys just losing control on their own just because it's racetrack coming out of the corners. It's very tricky. It's very easy to get sideways just getting on the gas if you fall asleep for a second, like Stenhouse did in the Nationwide Series race. He even said himself he wasn't really expecting it. The car, he was just riding around until that competition caution because of the rain, and it was a very green racetrack. And he ended up just losing it. And he ended up in the inside wall, and he had a horrible finish because of it and lost his championship lead. And that happened to some other guys in the Truck Series race, just losing it. And it's very difficult to race alongside someone, and you just got to have two good cars. And even the cars that were winning the races, as we saw in the Nationwide Series race again, and Ryan Truex's car, racing that 20 car for Joe Gibbs, he was extremely loose, and he was leading the race, and you just saw him fighting the car. It was not a pretty ride for him at all, and he was just fighting to stay up front, and he almost wrecked pretty much in every corner those last 20 laps. And that was very impressive, just that he kept that together. But in the Truck Series race, Kevin Harvick did have the dominant truck, but rain kind of played a factor. They had to red flag the race twice, and on the second red flag, they had to end it. Harvick, as I said, had the dominant truck. He led pretty much all the laps up until the time where he pitted, and some other guys stayed out. And Todd Bodine ended up winning this race based on it being rain shortened. He stayed out along with Parker Kligerman and Cale Gale and Nelson Piquet Jr., I believe, and some other guys. And so yeah, he takes his first win of the season, and he has been very quiet this season, very consistent, but he kind of jumps up there in the points 3 positions, and still looking pretty for him as he moves up to 6th position in the points. The lead stays with Justin Lofton after this race, and Timothy Peters is just behind him, and the rookie Ty Dillon is in 3rd place in the points. James Buescher is in 4th, 16 back. Parker Kligerman, 22 back. And then Todd Bodine. John King did not race in this race, the Daytona 500 winner and the points leader for a couple weeks there. And also Johnny Sauter's woes just continue as he has another bad finish due to trouble. 17th in the points, 100 back. Very difficult deficit to overcome for him. Jason White finished in 33rd after wrecking on the racetrack, and he ended up falling 4 spots in the points. So the top finishers ended up being, in the truck race, Todd Bodine, Parker Kligerman, Kevin Harvick, Nelson Piquet Jr., Cale Gale, Ty Dillon, James Buescher, Matt Crafton, Timothy Peters, and then your points leader, Justin Lofton. In our Nationwide Series race, it was a decent race. Had some good racing, as I said. Guys, it's really difficult to get a handle of these cars, and once you do, you gotta keep up with the changes and the changes that the track makes, whether that be due to weather or just track conditions changing as we go, temperatures, sunshine, that kind of thing on the racetrack. That's just constantly changing at Dover and on this concrete. And Logano led over like 150 laps, and it looked like he wouldn't win the race because he came into the pits. And Truex looked like the dominant car towards the end of the race, and that's why Logano came in. He thought Truex would pass him, and they'd have to make some changes in order to get better than Truex. So he came in, and it was like a 50-lap run to the end, and Logano ended up catching Truex as he got pinched between 2 lap-down cars, and he actually had to slam on the brakes. Logano got a huge run on him. That was a common thing with this race, too. Lap cars not really giving enough room to the leaders, or not necessarily seeing the leaders, maybe. I'm not sure, but definitely Ryan Truex, Martin Truex Jr.'s younger brother, did a great job driving this race car, and he was definitely angry after the race, had those 2 cars that were racing side by side when he tried to come through. So it was a 1-2-3 finish for Joe Gibbs Racing in this race, with Brian Scott finally having a decent finish after his terrible season, and he finishes third after a good, consistent run. He's been having those kind of runs throughout the year, but he just can't finish them that way, and that's what's really been biting Brian Scott. As I mentioned, Stenhouse did crash in the Nationwide Series race, and he ended up losing the points lead after finishing 32nd. He is now behind Elliott Sadler by 12 points. And this race was really the cautions breed cautions theory really came in, because when guys are side by side, there's obviously a better chance for cars getting together in caution. Tempers flare on this racetrack just because you don't have to only race those around you, but it's like Darlington in that you have to really, as I said, keep up with the racetrack and keep up with your changes. But in this race, there were 3 cautions in the first 42 laps of the race, or within 42 laps, and then there was not another caution for another 103 laps. Then the final 3 cautions were within 25 laps of each other. So the cautions were really staggered, but they were together as well. Just keeping up with the racetrack was a key in this race, and it's going to be a key tomorrow. We thought Truex had the best car as we were watching the race toward the end, and he was just gapping the field. But as it came to like 20 laps to go, he was just driving the wheels off of it, possibly overdrove it a little bit, wore out his equipment, his tires, and just couldn't keep up with the racetrack at the end, got that change going on, whether it was overdriving or the racetrack changed, and he was just sideways in every corner. Overall, in the Nationwide Series race, it was great side-by-side racing, and it was also very competitive. There were only 9 cars in the lead lap at the end, though, so that dictates kind of what pace the leaders were running at, and guys weren't able to take the wave around because the guys were staying out because the cautions were so close together. The leaders wouldn't all come down pit road, so they couldn't take the wave around. So that's why we had very few guys on the lead lap at the end of this race. So overall, Joey Logano finished first, Ryan Truex second, Brian Scott third, Kurt Busch comes home in fourth, and he and Justin Allgaier were kind of getting into it throughout the race. Allgaier didn't like how Busch was like using his bumper to kind of move him around, and Kurt Busch was very irritated after this race. Austin Dillon came in sixth, Truck Series champion last year. Elliott Sadler, new points leader, finishes in seventh. It was almost like he was racing a points race after Stenhouse got knocked out. And Ty Dillon, who had his Nationwide Series debut, did a great job in the number 33 car. Has been driven by Brendan Gaughan in the past, and he did a very good job with that, finishing in 8th position. And James Buescher ends up finishing 9th in this race. Danica Patrick was involved in an incident with Sam Hornish, who, if you'd remember, she wrecked after the race at Daytona, and that might be just coincidence, it might not. Sam Hornish kind of dove into a 3-wide situation with Danica in the middle, and I believe Brad Sweet on the top, and he got into Danica, and they both ended up wrecking. Hornish ended up not having too bad of a finish, despite being a lap down and getting some damage in prior accidents. And just, again, on mixing it up with the lapped cars, it's just very difficult to get out of the way on this track because of the preferred lines. The track's not that wide, and a lot of the times if you get out of the lane, or the preferred line, it's very difficult to control the car, as it is in the preferred lane, I should say. It's also something that's very difficult to drive, just this racetrack overall. As I said, it eats up race cars, and it's a very difficult track to race. So Elliott Sadler comes away with the points lead after this race, having a very consistent, steady season. And Ricky Stenhouse Jr., kind of feast or famine with him. Very good finishes or not very well. Not really a lot of average finishes for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And Austin Dillon, his first year in the series, he's only 14 back of the points leader. Very quiet season for him. People aren't really talking about him a lot. And he's just kind of doing what he needs to do to stay in this championship hunt until we reach closer to the end of the season. As for the FedEx 400 benefiting Autism Speaks, Mark Martin, is the pole sitter, and Jimmy Johnson will be on the outside pole. For notables in qualifying, Tony Stewart ends up qualifying on 29th. He's kind of had a bad stretch, few weeks here, so we're going to have to see how he recovers from that, if he recovers from that. But last year, if you'd remember, he barely snuck into the chase. He ended up winning half of the races in the chase, so it was a good finish for him. I expect Jimmy Johnson to run well in this race. Denny Hamlin to run very well in this race. His sponsor, if he could win it, that would be great. Casey Kane to continue after this win, or the win at Charlotte last weekend, just to kind of build on his success, and that was like a 6th top 10 finish in a row. So he's building towards being a real competitor as we move toward this chase. And a guy that I'd really look out for, though, is Martin Truex Jr., because he did get his 1 Cup win here, and he really enjoys racing at this racetrack, and I think this racetrack fits him. I think he's going to run very well, and I think I'm going to pick him for my winner, but I'd also look out for those other guys. It'll also be interesting to see Jeff Gordon, how he builds off of his consistent run at Charlotte last weekend, that 2nd place finish, if he can build on that and slowly make his way into the chase as we move forward, or if he's going to kind of just flop the season and not going to end up in the chase. Keeping up with the racetrack will be big tomorrow, and that'll be something that everyone's going to have to deal with as this track goes through transitions, cloud cover, non-cloud cover, and hopefully we don't see any rain tomorrow and we can get the full 400 in, but if we don't, I guess we're just going to have to deal with it. So tune in and check it out tomorrow, and I'll have a post-race video for you up then.